Welcome in to the Late Night Gamecock Show. My name is Matt Anderson, and joining me, as always, is Alex Jones of thebigspur.com. Alex, how you doing?
Doing great. It's good to be back, and good to be back after week off or so that we had. But a lot of stuff to cover from that last week, and a lot of stuff moving forward. It's hard to believe a week away from SEC Media Days, and then before you know it, week one will be here.
Yeah, it's crazy, Alex. We're actually 53 days away from the start of the South Carolina football season
Yeah,
in Atlanta against Virginia Tech. But, Alex, speaking of media days, are you going to Atlanta
yep,
this year for it?
I'll be
Yeah.
there. Yep.
All right. So in the comments here, I want everyone to find the dumbest question that you could possibly think of for Alex to ask anyone other than Shane Beamer. Alex, I
Yeah.
need you to stay there all 4 days. I need you to ask. Oh gosh, let's think of one. Coach
Yeah.
Napier, do you feel like you're on the hot seat right now, or do you think last year was okay?
Yeah. Like it's some of the questions you'll hear throughout these 4 days of stuff. It's just kind of crazy, but it's part of it.
I want to give a big shout out to Craig. I see him in the chat box. What's up, Craig? Hope you're doing well. Ask Kalen DeVore. So, do you feel like the spotlight is bigger this year than it was last year after Nick Saban left Alabama?
Yeah, ask Hugh Freeze, how many games do you think you need to win this year?
Oh my gosh! We can do this all night, so I'm not gonna do it all night. But I would ask Hugh Freeze as well. So Hugh Freeze,
Yeah.
you had a really good recruiting class last year. Do you think they'll all stick around next year?
I'll be surprised if he's not asked about the whole golfing thing. Oh, did we lose Matt? We
Thumbs
may.
up, either me or you. But yeah, Alex, Hugh Freeze is gonna have some interesting questions because those Alabama fanboys are not gonna hold any punches.
Yeah, for sure. It's always
anyway. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I say that's always one of the fun parts about SEC Media Days is just kind of picking out who had to answer like the worst questions of it all.
Oh yeah. So like I said earlier, we are 53 days away as of right now from South Carolina kicking off against Virginia Tech. So Alex,
I think we're losing Matt again. All right.
South Carolina and Virginia Tech. What was that, Alex?
All right, we good. I think you keep going in and out. I can't tell if that's me or you. Let's roll the intro real quick.
Let me. Okay.
Welcome to the Late Night Gamecock Show from Chief Sports South Carolina. Here are your hosts, Matt Anderson and Alex Jones of thebigspur.com.
Well, we're going to see if that's a little bit better. But hey, first time in a week,
We're rusty.
Dude, so rusty. Like, actually, I had like a little bit of butterflies tonight, like starting this show back up because it's been a little bit. But no, we are back, and there are 53 days until the Gamecocks kick off against Virginia Tech, which means we have 7 shows after tonight to get through all of our preseason stuff. And we're going to start tonight with Virginia Tech. Alex, I will say that I saw earlier today, before we get off SEC Media Days, that Nick Barrett, Lenora Sellers, and DQ Smith are going to represent the Gamecocks at SEC Media Days. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, when I was thinking about it here these past few days of which 3 would end up going, like I think you felt pretty confident Lenora Sellers was going to be one of the ones picked, and DQ Smith was another one I thought had a pretty good chance, and I thought maybe like a Jalen Kilgore, but Nick Barrett seems pretty. It seems like they always tried to bring one of those seniors kind of older veteran players on the team. And I think, with that defensive tackle position, Nick Barrett, you kind of heard it from the players in the spring about how he's taken on a leadership role in that room. So I think it's just kind of getting him there to, kind of talk about the defense as a whole and defensive tackle room, because it seems like he's kind of becoming a leader. But not too surprised by that trio of players, and really interested to hear what they say in Atlanta on Monday.
Yeah, I think Luke Doty kind of stole the show last year when it came to Gamecocks out representing the university at SEC Media Days. And look, Lenore Sellers is on the national map, but he's not on the national map like he can be. And I think this is a great opportunity for the university to showcase him in a bid to get him potentially a Heisman, potentially, a first-round draft pick, all the things that we've come to know about Lenore. So it makes my heart happy having a Florence, South Carolina kid out there at SEC Media Days in front of the entire country. So that's really exciting. Alex, before we get to Virginia Tech, let's talk a little bit about Rasul Faison. We've seen some stuff in the news today. I want to get your take on that, and what's your thoughts?
Yeah, maybe there's an answer one way or the other soon. I think it's been one where, South Carolina's done everything they can to give the NCAA all the information that they need to make an answer, come up with a conclusion in this whole case. And we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if in a few days maybe you hear something, kind of see all the reports out there. But we'll see. I'm really interested to see, because it's a really big kind of factor into this upcoming season. Rasul Faison, you kind of see his highlights and the stats of what he did at Utah State last year. It was pretty good and had put up some pretty good stats. So he could definitely step in and be in that number one running back. And so we'll see. Just really interested to see how this process. It's been a long process. I didn't think it'd take this long, especially after the NIL kind of attorney Darren Heitner was hired. I thought maybe it'd be a little bit quicker, but it's I think without a doubt you can say South Carolina's really done everything in their power. And Rasul Faison, everybody's done everything in their power to now it's just kind of in the hands of the NCAA.
Yeah, and the reason we're talking about this is because Faison put out a little tweet today saying, please pray for me and give me the opportunity to play another year of college football. And like you said, Alex, we've laid this out. He's only played 3 years. He's had some weird circumstances. I don't know what prompted that tweet from him today. I can make assumptions, but I'm not going to, because it's not my place. But let's see what happens with him. I think the Gamecocks are on solid footing either way, but it seems like all the concern about Rasul is getting real right now. And for a long time, Alex and I have told everyone on this that watches this show that there's been no news. Well, today there was news. So we hope that for Gamecock fans and for Rasul that he's able to play this year. It looks like that might be coming to a head sooner rather than later. And that's a good thing for the University of South Carolina. It's a good thing for the coaching staff and the team to know what's going to be in play.
I think, if you're South Carolina at this point, you just want to answer one way or the other. You're getting into the point where you're into the month, beginning of August, beginning of August, you're going to be starting preseason practice. You want to know who's going to be on your team and who's not going to be on the team. I think it's just, you get to the point, obviously South Carolina, as I said, has done everything they can to put Rasul in the best case scenario to get what they need. But, I think at this point, you just need an answer and kind of move on and go about your day with it.
And with a new offensive coordinator, although it's a guy that's been around for a while, you want to know who to give your reps to. You want to figure out who's the best running back for each situation. And if Rasul is not eligible, he doesn't even take enough reps. It's just that cut and dry. And Rasul would agree with you with that, and he'd be disappointed if that's the case. But we'll see. Alex, you have already started, and it amazes me every year that you've already started your preseason opponent previews. And I think that you've done a couple of them now. How many are you through on the Big Spur?
I've done Virginia Tech. I did Missouri today and Vanderbilt. So I try to kind of get them done, maybe even leading into before preseason camp. Last year, I got a little bit too close where I was talking about Clemson about 2 weeks out from the first week of the season. So I'm trying to get it done a little bit quicker. But it's kind of interesting, especially getting that Virginia Tech one done. And I know we're going to dive into more of the Hokies here in a minute, but it's really an interesting matchup, I think.
I think so too. And Alex, with that being said, I've done a little bit of research into Virginia Tech. I feel like I know the nuts and bolts, but you've already done your deep dive. So Alex, what can we say about the Hokies from a coaching standpoint going into this season?
Yeah, so Brent Pry, he's going into his fourth season as the head coach of Virginia Tech. Last year Virginia Tech finished 6-7 overall record. They got to faced off against Minnesota in the Duke's Mayo Bowl, and I think lost like 24-10. And from kind of an offensive coaching standpoint, Tyler Bowen, who is the offensive coordinator, he left to go to Ohio State to be the offensive line coach. So I actually kind of like the hire that they made with Phil Montgomery. He's a former head coach at Tulsa, a few years or multiple years there, and actually comes to Virginia Tech after being the Birmingham Stallions offensive coordinator in the USFL now. I think it's what the name is called. It's kind of changed around here lately, but has led offenses too at Auburn, Baylor, and Houston. So an experienced guy, and not the I know we'll get more into offensive here, but it's you got your quarterback coming back. So I think that's one thing. Kyron Jones did miss a little bit of time due to a minor medical procedure in spring practice. And, I guess we can go ahead and start moving into some of the offensive things with Virginia Tech. That's something that, I think you'd have a little bit of worry about for if you're Virginia Tech, is just having a new offensive coordinator and your quarterback missing some time in spring practice due to injury. Like, I think you want to have as much, connection and time to build on the field as possible. But, Kyron Jones is a really good quarterback. We've kind of seen what he can do. Like, he's an experienced guy. I think last year threw for 1,500 yards, a little over 1,500 yards and 10 touchdowns. But, he's really can be a threat on the ground too. I think 336 yards and 6 scores. So, going to be a guy that, has an experienced quarterback, can beat you kind of both ways. And you're really going to test South Carolina's offense early on. And then really kind of from a coaching standpoint, it's going to be, you can go back and look at old Philip Montgomery's offenses at Auburn, Baylor, and Houston, and heck, maybe even Birmingham Stallions. But you're going to kind of have to figure out, what can we gain from, what we've seen from Virginia Tech and his offenses, kind of put a game plan together.
Yeah, it's interesting because there was a picture that was floating around, I think yesterday or the day before, with the quarterback Drones, who looked like he had his foot completely covered up on the field. I wouldn't read too much into that nowadays. We're getting too close to the start of the season, and whether that was precautionary, medical, or just fool's gold, you really don't know. So, as Will Muschamp would say, he's got a foot, and we'll see what happens there. So, Alex, I do think it's interesting that the new offensive coordinator Montgomery did coach Robert Griffin III, and as we think about it, that has been a number of years ago. Golly, RG3, he was a thing when I was in grad school. So that was like 2013. So It's been a long time, but coaches don't forget things. Do you think it means anything that a coach has been, potentially out of the mainstream of Power 5 football or Power 2 football for a while?
I don't think not really, because I think you kind of just, if you're Philip Montgomery, you roll with what you saw worked during your time at those other schools, and I think you kind of just roll with it and see. Like, I think it's one of those where it's kind of hard to say now. Maybe you see what Virginia Tech can do in the first half of the schedule, and especially because you do have an experienced quarterback in Drones. But that's something that kind of what I was talking about earlier. Like, that could make game planning for Virginia Tech a little bit challenging, just because you haven't seen a Philip Montgomery offense in college in a long time. Like, kind of just had to piece some things together, and that could end up being pretty challenging to build a game plan around.
Yeah, and Alex, I didn't mean to set you up there, but Michael Lim was right on it. If you say it's going to be a challenge for Montgomery, it's going to be a challenge for Mike Shula as well.
Right, so, exactly. Yeah.
You really can't say that. But at let's see, it looks like the backfield, there's a transfer from Bowling Green. I don't know how many running backs they actually have that we can talk much about that we've seen. But overall, it seems like at running back and wide receiver, it's going to be a transfer-laden roster. And going back to what you just said about Montgomery being the offensive coordinator, I don't think South Carolina knows what to expect.
Yeah, and kind of to the running back point, like, Virginia Tech, when we get to defense, we'll talk about some of their losses that they had from draft or transfer portal or whatnot. But offensively, the biggest loss they had was Bashul Tootin, who was a fourth-round pick by the Jaguars. And guy that was over 100 or 1,000-yard rusher last year and 15 touchdowns. And they got one guy, Jeremiah Coney, who's coming back, who has 179 yards rushing last year. But I think the guy that's going to be to watch for them is Bowling Green transfer Terrion Stewart, who rushed for 898 yards last season, a really good back. And they also added Braden Bennett, the Coastal Carolina transfer running back, who he had 781 yards last year. So, Tootin, that's going to be hard to replace. He's a really good running back for them last year. And obviously you see that with the Jaguars taking him in the fourth round. But I am kind of intrigued to see, kind of learn even more about those two backs that they got. Because, Terrion Stewart, you see some stuff about him and his potential. And then Braden Bennett, obviously, both of these guys have, shown what they can do in college. I'm interested to see kind of how that turns out.
And then the offensive line is just another question mark for Virginia Tech. They're going to be replacing a ton of starters. And for me, Alex, when I think about this, and as we kind of round out the offense for Virginia Tech, this is an opportunity for the South Carolina defense to really make a statement game to start the season. And I would be concerned if the defensive line is not able to get much of a push. Not crazy concerned, but still concerned knowing all the new faces they have on the offensive line.
Yeah, there will be a ton of new faces for Virginia Tech. I can't remember if you mentioned it or not, but they lost their top four receivers from last year too, in Gosnell, Lane, Jennings, and DeQuan Felton. They got Benji Gosnell coming back, who was their leading pass catcher with 32 catches for 341 yards, and Aiden Green's coming back as well. But they added a few guys into that I think could be intriguing. Donovan Green, I think, is kind of starting to work back a little bit from an injury. He was at Wake Forest. He had 380 yards receiving last year. And Isaiah Spencer was a Jackson State transfer who had over 600 yards receiving. But a lot of new faces, and that's tough to lose your top running back and also your top four wide receivers to go along with some of the losses that they had on the offensive line. And they brought in Matt Moore, who was the offensive line coach of West Virginia. He's going to be at Virginia Tech this year, and he actually brought three guys with him from West Virginia. And so we'll see. They had another big loss on that offensive line too, and Xavier Chaplin, who was one of the top guys in the transfer portal. And I think he's going to Auburn this year. So we'll see. It's a lot of new faces, and again, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with both now Mike Shula and both coaches in this game. It's going to be interesting to see how the defense's game plan for this, being that really kind of for the most part, really on Virginia Tech's side of this from an offensive standpoint, just a whole bunch of new faces.
Well, on the defensive side, Alex, it doesn't get much better. And look, this is one of those things where this is the classic South Carolina 10-point favorite can lay an egg, but they have a new defensive coordinator as well, Alex.
Yeah, I'll make sure I'm pronouncing this right. Sam Skeefs. I may not be.
You're asking the wrong person if you're asking me for
I think that's right. I apologize if it's not, but a guy that's got some NFL experience that comes back there. So it's I keep saying it, but a lot of new faces that South Carolina's going to have to prepare for. And again, on the same side for Virginia Tech, there's going to be some new faces they got to prepare for from a South Carolina standpoint as well. But yeah, that's why I mentioned not really much at media days, but when you get into preseason camp and get into those press conferences and things like that, how are they working to kind of build that game plan for so many new faces? And that's not something that's new. Obviously, you had to do that last year for Old Dominion because Old Dominion had pretty much a whole new roster coming into that game as well. So maybe that does help you a little bit from a game planning standpoint, but that's going to be really interesting to kind of see how it all plays out.
And I think the defensive line for Virginia Tech is a strength. I think that this is an opportunity for the South Carolina offensive line look, let's not kid ourselves. South Carolina has new faces on the offensive line as well. New faces. And when I say that, I don't mean just transfers. I mean, guys that weren't playing last year that you might remember their name, and, Tremont Bowe and Big Tree. But, this is going to be, I think, the most pivotal thing for South Carolina because Lenore Sellers can get out of pressure. But at the same time, if this defensive line for Virginia Tech has a field day against South Carolina, you got to pray it's not North Carolina all over again.
Yeah, I think it will be a little bit of a test for the South Carolina offensive line. Virginia Tech lost, Antoine Powell-Rowland and tackle Anais Peoples, who were both 6th-round selections in the NFL draft. So that's going to be tough to replace, especially Powell-Rowland. He was really good coming off the edge for him last year. And Then the secondary, you also lost Dorian Strong, which I think was also a 6th-round pick in the draft. But they do return, their top 2 tacklers, linebackers, Caleb Blitzen and Jaden Keller. I think, 83 and 72 tackles, respectively, between those two. But then, you also have to replace the Keontae Jenkins, who had 65 tackles, Sam Brunfield, 60 tackles, Kelly Lawson, 40 tackles. Like, I think Brumfield and Lawson, they both went to Memphis and UCF to transfer. But there is a little bit of some guys of those coming back. But really, you look in that secondary too. Like, there's a lot of new faces in that secondary as well. And that the Virginia Tech secondary, I think, was something that you kind of looked at last year as could be potentially strong with Dorian Strong and the rest of those guys. But a lot of new faces in that secondary as well, who are going to have to be preparing to go up against Lenora Sellers and South Carolina's pretty much passing attack and offensive game plan.
Yeah, and then, I mean, the monkey in the room that we haven't talked about yet is that Shane Beamer's alma mater. His dad coached there for eons.
I wonder how much that's going to be talked about on the broadcast.
I would say 37.5 is my over-under.
I'll go over.
Yeah, and this has to be tough for Shane Beamer one way or another, winning or losing to Virginia Tech. Gosh, I could do it all night. The kicker, John Love.
And how many times do they show Frank Beamer in the stands?
Oh, gosh. Hey, here's the real question, Alex. Is Frank Beamer wearing a Virginia Tech shirt and hat or a Gamecock shirt and hat?
Or maybe does he split it up? Does he go Virginia Tech hat, Carolina shirt? Or, yeah. And that's why he's going to be shown probably a lot on TV.
If I had to predict it, I think he would wear a Gamecock shirt and hat.
I think so.
Yeah. Just, I mean, look, as a guy that has a son, that's what I'd do.
Yeah.
So, regardless of allegiances. Now, I will say, if my son goes to Clemson, like, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. But the kicker, John Love, was 16 for 18 on field goals in 2024. I'm sorry, I don't know what the distances were. Alex, do you have that by chance?
Yeah, so he was 8 of 9 from 40 plus and 3 of 4 from 50 plus. And I'm pretty sure, I'm looking it up right now, I think he's from Spartanburg. And I think his brother is committed to Virginia Tech too for kicking. But I mean, he's a solid field goal kicker. Obviously, with those, 8 of 9 from 40 plus and 3 of 4 from 50 plus. So that's pretty solid. It can be a difference maker.
So, Alex, one of the questions, and Michael just got in the chat box, and hey, Brandon, I see you. I'm gonna get you in a minute here, but Michael says, will South Carolina have any special team fakes or trick plays? I'm gonna say yes.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I mean, over a half. Yeah, there's gonna be at least one. I think it depends how the game's going. If the game is, there's going to be one regardless. But look, Virginia Tech knows that too. I'm not sharing state secrets.
Yeah.
But I think if the Gamecocks are winning handedly, I don't think there's going to be more than one unless the situation calls for it. But I would not be surprised to see an onside kick, a 2-point conversion, really anything and everything, a fake punt. Trust me, Shane Beamer, he wants to win this game.
Yeah, I was going to say, really just kind of depends on how the games go and the flow of the game, but would not be one bit surprised to see some of that type of stuff, and really wouldn't be surprised to see Virginia Tech do some of that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point, Alex. I don't know why I didn't think of that, because it's Frank Beamer and Shane Beamer, and you know what? If you're Virginia Tech, why wouldn't you do it?
You're right. It almost feels like it'd be like a disservice if like one of those two teams didn't do something special teams wise.
It's going to be Brent Pryball.
Yeah, right.
Well, hey, Brandon, I did want to get back to you. We're going to talk a lot about recruiting here in this next segment, but Alex, how about you go ahead and let's hear from D's Wings, and then we'll be right back.
Mike here for one of the better dining options in the capital city. When I first moved there, I asked people around the radio station, where are the best wings? Well, the consensus was D's Wings. That was then. Today, they still have the best wings, but it's so much more now in their new location at 415 Meeting Street in West Columbia. Yeah, they get voted the best wings on a routine basis. Yes, they get voted the best sports bar on a routine basis, but they're not just about wings, and really, they're not just a sports bar. It is a family-run local restaurant and bar with 20 TVs and 25 beers on tap. app. And how about these daily specials? Every Monday night at D's, you've got 75-cent wings from 4 until closing. Tacos on Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, 18 wings and a pitcher of beer for $29. You've also got ribs and oyster bucket specials on Thursday. And no matter how big the party is, 20 or more, no problem. Just call ahead of time and they'll take terrific care of you. They'll do takeout as well. And guess what? A human will answer the phone and take the order. Billy and his staff do an outstanding job. Check out D's, 415 Meeting Street in West Columbia.
So we are back with the Late Night Gamecock Show. It is July 8th, and we are hoping that all of you had a great 4th of July. Hopefully all of you have your fingers. There was no put in reverse, Terry, put in reverse, which I did see on the 4th of July. It just popped up. One of my friends sent it to me. It was hilarious. But we're happy you're all here with us tonight. And I think, Alex, right now is the perfect time to begin kind of finalizing this recruiting board as it stands right now. We always talk about it, June, July, August. There are a ton of commitments that happen across college football. And Alex, this July is no different.
Yeah, it's been, kind of a crazy, when you look at June's always kind of that big commitment date or month just because you get some of those official visits, but that rolls into July as well because, as we'll talk about here with, like a lot of South Carolina's targets, like a lot of their guys wanted to get through all their official visits and then make a decision. And that's why you just see so many commitments through the month of July because that's not just a South Carolina target thing. Like you see that around the country. Like a lot of guys now just want to get through all their official visits, kind of sit down for a week or two and then announce their commitments. And so we'll see. I think it's still going to be, it's only July 8th. So I think it's still going to be a pretty busy month. And South Carolina still got a lot of targets on the board.
Yeah, we say it's only July 8th, but golly, how is it July 8th?
Yeah, right.
Time is a thief. If you go to 24/7 Sports, I don't even know if you have to be a member to see this. Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can go look and see announcements that are happening, and they usually put it out like 7 days, a week in advance. There are a lot of kids that are announcing throughout the country. So South Carolina is in on a bunch of those guys. And what we're going to do, Alex, is we're going to take it position by position. And look, we did this 2 weeks ago, but a lot has changed. And as far as like who's made announcements and where things are leaning right now. So we're going to go through it. But before we do, Alex, the Gamecocks right now currently have 10 commitments. And if you look at the recruiting ranks, they are 55th in the country on 24/7 Sports and overall team rankings for commitments. And I want to just really reiterate to people that that's an ugly number. I 100% get it. But the way that these algorithms work, if you have 10 commitments, you're going to be sub 30, sub 40, sub 50. Yeah. That's just where you're going to be. If you look at the per player average rating, the Gamecocks, when I did it yesterday, were 11th in the country. So when you look at it from that standpoint, it kind of goes back to 2 years ago when you had the Dylan Stewart and you had the Josiah Thompson class, where the Gamecocks were really high up, as high as like number 7 or 8 at one point on per player rating. So the Gamecocks are getting high quality players. And on top of that, there haven't been a lot of non-4 or 5 stars that have come in for official visits this past summer. So remember that, and remember that if you want to get to where Gamecock fans want to be, and I feel like I'm doing a Kamala Harris word salad, but if you want to get to where you want to be, you have to recruit this way, and you're going to get your fair share. But Alex, looking at it right now, I think the board has 29 guys, and I think 10 of them are committed. So you're talking about 19 prospects that are up in the wind. Let's go ahead and start with quarterback, and we'll talk about Landon Duckworth. He has a commitment date, I believe, scheduled for July 18th, so 10 days from now. Alex, thoughts on that?
Yeah, still feel really good about South Carolina's chances with him, and he came in or had cut his list down to 2 with South Carolina and Auburn, and then not too long after he took both official visits and then took unofficials to both, and with it being a South Carolina Auburn battle, still I think even then you still felt pretty good about their chances, but then when Auburn ended up flipping Penn State 4-star quarterback Peyton Falzone, I think gave you a pretty good idea of where Auburn was thinking in this race of where they were. And so, heading into that July 18th commit, which I think is next Friday, if I'm not mistaken, I still feel really good about South Carolina's chances. And that'd be a huge pickup. A guy that's, a top 50 player, number 50 overall, I think number 6 in the quarterback in the country, really good player, can kind of do it all, both from in the passing game and on the ground. He can really do it all. And really interested to see kind of from a ranking standpoint where he ends up, just because he went to the Elite 11 last month and came to the Elite 11 or came to South Carolina from the Elite 11 for that unofficial visit. But the Elite 11 is really kind of a camp that's really kind of tends to guys who are almost pocket passes. It's just it's a throw-in camp for the most part. And just sometimes you wonder. I was really interested to see how Landon Duckworth did, and ended up to have 20 guys out there, and he was named to the Elite 11 class. So you can really see he has some really nice moments out there, can really spin it. And then you add in the part of what he can do with his legs. It'd be a pretty huge pickup for South Carolina.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Alex. And on top of that, when you talk about a top 11, right? And especially the quarterback position, quarterbacks get a lot of attention. And, if you have a top 11 guy, I mean, how many teams are in college football? Top 11. That's good.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, when you look at, okay, you got the 19th offensive tackle. Well, what's 19 divided by 2? 8.5.
Okay,
so you have one of the best prospects in the country. So South Carolina's done a really good job there. And look, this is a marathon. It's not a race. And we're going to talk about a lot of these players here in a moment that I wouldn't say things are over with. And some people want to think that they want instant gratification. I want the guy to commit right now, right here. And I get it. I'm the same way. A bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
we'll keep going through here. Running back, Amari Thomas and Carson Baker are 2 4-star running backs, both committed to teams in Florida. Amari Thomas with Florida State and Carson Baker with Florida. I think that South Carolina is going to keep recruiting both of these guys. I haven't heard much on Carson Baker here in a while, but I know Amari Thomas is still actively listening, at least to South Carolina, and it seems like a Florida State and Gamecock battle. Moving on to wide receiver, Alex, Sequel Patterson, 4-star commitment. Then you have Samarian Wingo, 4-star. I haven't seen a commitment date yet. Have you heard anything there, Alex?
So I think it's going to be a case with him. He may tell the coaching staff of whichever school he's going to go to. I think maybe next week or so he's going to tell the coaching staff, and then I think maybe not announce until his first day of school. So I think that was the plan, kind of coming out of his official visit. Not sure if that's changed. Haven't seen anything there, but definitely one I'm going to be keeping an eye on, though. I think it could end up being a South Carolina Florida battle, and we'll see. But I think that official visit was really big for South Carolina to get him in, and I think made a pretty big impact. Because I think we were all kind of thinking, coming into his official visit, that could end up being a Florida-Miami type of battle. It was kind of looking that way, but now it seems like it could be a South Carolina Florida thing, and I think it seems like they're in it. Obviously, it could be challenging to get him out of the state of Florida because Florida's recruiting really well right now, recruiting the state really well. But Mike Furry has them squarely in it.
Well, and what I will say too is that South Carolina, for everyone that said it's going to be really difficult for the Gamecocks to recruit wide receivers, coming off of 6 wide receivers last year, it actually makes it a little bit easier to recruit when you find your 1 or 2 guys and say, look, you're my 1 or 2. And that's the message that South Carolina is sending to Sequel Patterson, however you pronounce his name, and Samarian Wingo. Then you have 2, I don't want to say they're backup options, Alex. I think that's unfair to the players. But you have 2 kids that are committed to other programs right now, and Brody Keefe and then Amari Acker. Amari Acker is committed to Liberty, and Brody Keefe is committed to Duke. But I do think there's conversations that are happening in both of those players' regards. I don't think anything's imminent, Alex, but your take on that.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. We'll see. I think it's just something just to continue watching as the season goes along, and it could be one where I'm interested to see just from a numbers standpoint what happens with that room, because you mentioned taking the 6 wide receivers this past cycle. How many do you want to take in this class already having sequel Patterson. Like, if South Carolina's able to land a Samori and Wingo, do they feel like they want to be done in that room? Do they want to add more? Because obviously there's, from a wide receiver standpoint, but you also have to think about, the limits and whatever other players you want to add. So really kind of interesting to see, how that room kind of fills out, being that you got the big class in already, got one commitment already, and kind of see who, do they take two, do they take three, or maybe they just kind of sit at two if they're able to find two that they really like.
Oh, absolutely. And then you go to tight end. You have Jamel House, who's been committed for close to a year now. He was a 4-star commitment originally. I don't know why he's a 3-star now, but he looks like a really good prospect.
Yeah.
And then you have Caden Ramsey, who was a camp evaluation, got his offer. South Carolina seemed to move away from, what was his name? Landon Tilden?
Tilden Riley.
Like Tilden Riley. Yeah, they moved away from him, and I think that right now they'll be fine if it's Caden Ramsey and they made that decision.
Yeah, obviously have had Jamel House in the class for a long time, and a guy that we saw, I think you were at that camp that day when Newberry was there and saw Jamel House and looked really good, looked more like in a tight end body, and a guy that was still moving around really well. So kind of interesting to see where his ranking ends up, as well as more of his senior film gets out there. But then with that kind of second tight end spot, obviously the Caden Ramsey offer is out, and guy that's kind of intriguing, is listed as a wide receiver, but can obviously being recruited as a tight end, and you can kind of see it in some of their route running things. You can see what they're looking for, and a guy that if South Carolina's able to land him, kind of interested to see where he'd be in 2 years or so. I think he could fit in right in what Sean Elliott's looking for there.
I think so too. And then offensive line, you have offensive tackle Zion Giles, 4-star Gamecock commitment. You have Anthony Baxter, who's probably going to play on the interior, I think, Alex, long term. Yeah. He's a 3-star, but I've talked to enough coaches in the state of South Carolina that say he's one of the better offensive linemen over the past couple of years, kind of like Blake Franks, if you want to give a little comparison there. And then, the big one is Darius Gray, 5-star. He's taken his official visits. He's got his finalist. He has recently stated that he'd like to, wait a little bit longer until he makes a commitment. But I don't know if it's going to go that long.
Yeah, we'll see. That was another one kind of we talked about earlier. That was a big official visit South Carolina had with him, and I think kind of checked all the boxes they needed, and obviously had a lot of attention when he was on campus, and I think they did everything they needed to do, and could end up being maybe like an LSU South Carolina battle, because LSU had some momentum in their recruitment coming into South Carolina's official visit, but that's really interesting to see kind of how this timeline with him kind of formed. But I think South Carolina's put themselves in a pretty good spot there, and if you're able to find a way to land Darius Gray, that's a 5-star in the Virginia state of Virginia, a state that South Carolina's really trying to get into, has done really well since Shane Beamer's been the head coach, and would just be another huge get if they're able to pull it off.
Yeah, I agree. And then you have JB Shabazz, 3-star kid on 24/7, finalist of South Carolina, Tennessee, Ohio State. It looks like, as of today, and shout out to JC Sherbert on the BigSpur.com, who recently said it looks like Tennessee. It's a kid that South Carolina really liked, but also really liked South Carolina. And I think it's one of those things right now where this is an NIL deal. I can't say it any other way. And South Carolina has put a line in the sand and said, this is what we think your valuation is, and he's probably going to go to Tennessee. Alex, thoughts on that?
Yeah, it seems like, right now, if you had to say, if you had to put in prediction, I think it may be for Tennessee, for Shabazz. They've been in this one, but, Tennessee and Ohio State have also been right there. And I kind of wondered if it was going to come down to the South Carolina, Tennessee type of thing, just kind of, I guess, maybe the two closest schools to his home. But, right now, I think I can see it maybe going Tennessee's way.
Yeah, and so he's actually committed July 11th. Then you have offensive tackle Kamari Blair. He has not released a public commitment date as of now. Kind of looks like a South Carolina, Tennessee battle. Maybe Ole Miss is sprinkled in there. I don't know where this is going to go, and I think it's one of those where if you miss on JB Shabazz, you kind of want this recruitment to linger a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's still one to keep an eye on with Kamari Blair. South Carolina put themselves in a great spot coming in his official visit, and you wondered if was he going to take the other official visits to Ole Miss and Tennessee, and with him being a Tennessee, and playing high school in the state of Tennessee, like I think you had to wonder, like, how much of a move could Tennessee make on that last official visit? And it sounds like they did, and like it could very well come down to Tennessee and South Carolina. And they're really interested to see, like, as of right now, he hadn't, said commitment date wise or anything like that, but really interested to see kind of how that one goes. Because I think South Carolina's still in it, but you still have to wonder, how much is Tennessee going to be a factor here too, being that he's an in-state guy for them.
Yeah, then let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. Carter Meadows, Julia Walker, they both committed to Michigan last week, coming off official visits. I don't know about Carter Meadows. I know he had a great official visit, but I'm just going to say, like, keep an eye out for Julian Walker. I don't think that one's done.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to definitely be keeping an eye on that one, just keep watching. And just being that, obviously, with the family connection with his dad being on staff, like, how many games does he show up to any games? Being that he's right down the road at Dutch Fork, and really good player and a guy. I'm just interested to see how that one. I think obviously they're going to continue to recruit him because I think could end up being one of the best edge prospects in the country, just with his size and the way he plays. Like, he's a really good player, so I think they'll continue to go after and see what they can do there.
And then the other defensive end is Zion Ely, 5-star, number 2 overall. Don't want to spend too much time here, Alex, but I just don't think that Maryland commitment is solid, and that does not mean South Carolina. It could mean any other school in the country, really. But yeah, we'll see. We're gonna keep an eye on it. We're not gonna talk about it on the Big Spur. If he comes, I promise you'll know.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was down for the camp visit. That was just like with his teammates. So, I mean, I think it was good for South Carolina to have him down, just to have him down in case something in his recruitment happens where he does decommit from Maryland. If that happens, but I don't know. I think obviously being that he's a number one. I don't know if he's some have him as one of the top players in the country, but Maryland's going to do whatever they can. You have to imagine to keep them, and just wanted to keep an eye on to see how Maryland season goes, how South Carolina season goes.
I'll go on record right now that he does not end his career at Maryland. I'll put it that way. That's how I feel about it. Defensive tackle, you have Aiden Harris, 4-star Gamecock commit. Noah Clark, 4-star Gamecock commit. PJ Dean, and this is one that we talked about 2 weeks ago, did commit to Georgia. He's listed as a defensive tackle. I think he's more of a linebacker defensive end right now. This is one the Gamecocks are going to run the race with.
Yeah, I think it's another one kind of like we were talking about with Julian Walker. Like, just, they're going to continue to go after him and continue to recruit him because that guy's another really good player and really kind of interesting recruitment just from, position standpoint, start as an offensive line recruit. I think you kind of can see him being an interior defensive lineman and put some more weight on, but could also, I think, be an edge guy to a defensive end guy. But that one, what was that? Last Monday, I think, that was kind of a crazy day in that recruitment. It kind of sounded like maybe South Carolina had a lot of momentum, and then Georgia seemed like got their momentum back late and ended up laying his commitment. And so, but again, like I think that's another one that you continue to watch and continue because I don't think they'll give up there.
No, South Carolina's going to consider him an uncommitted prospect in the way they recruit him. I would not be surprised to see him come to South Carolina for an unofficial visit this upcoming season. Valdon Sone, 4-star, top 50 kid in the country, came to camp when you and I were both there, Alex. I don't know. I don't know if he's close to a commitment. If I'm him, I'm going to wait a very long time and draw out that NIL money. But that's just me.
Yeah, I'm not sure, just from a South Carolina perspective, I think it was like a top 10 that he put out a few months ago, and South Carolina was in it. But he didn't officially visit in the summer, and I think, Georgia's one to watch there. I think there's a few schools, maybe Auburn as well, but we'll see. Like, I think that's one that, you would have liked to been able to find a way to get him in for an official visit to start kind of building that. But, obviously it doesn't have a commit date that I know of yet and kind of just see. But as of right now, I don't see much going on there from a South Carolina perspective.
Yeah, I think at linebacker, they're pretty much done, Alex. Keenan Britt, 3-star Gamecock commitment. Then you have Andrew Harris, Aiden's brother, 3-star commitment. We'll see on linebacker, but I think the Gamecocks feel pretty good right there. Then you go to DB, and this is where there's going to be a flurry of action coming up. And, if the Gamecocks do not land some of these guys, I think you're going to see the board shift, the board move, and you're going to see some offers flying out for South Carolina. But KJ Johnson is the 3-star defensive back commitment. Then you have Koski Barnes. He's committing 726. Look, man, that's South Carolina, Mississippi State, North Carolina, Rutgers, Miami, Kentucky. I think the Gamecocks would love to have him, but I don't have anything more than that. He seems still really open to have a commitment date on 726.
Yeah, right now he does have 2 crystal ball picks for South Carolina, and you kind of see what they see in him, especially what Torian Gray sees him. Guy that's 6'3", 190, and kind of when you watch his highlights, he does a little bit on both sides of the ball, plays some wide receiver, and shows some physicalness in the run game, willingness to play the run. But guy at that size, at 6'3", 190, kind of fits exactly what Torian Gray looks for in cornerbacks. And another North Carolina guy out of Grimsley, like I think that's once again a state South Carolina's really trying to get into here under Shane Bieber. But they're able to. I'm really interested to see how that one kind of goes. Obviously, it's almost a whole month until his commitment, or less than a month, but it got a little while until his commitment. But they're really kind of an interesting prospect for him. All the visits he took, and he really kind of emerged onto the recruiting scene kind of late. But you see what they like in him.
And I will say this, that with the way that these defensive backs are making commitments over the next couple of weeks, I think it does help South Carolina that he's committing last, in case there needs to be some shifting of NIL money and ways to make it happen. Then Alex, you have Samari Matthews. We've been talking about him for a very, very long time. 4-star defensive back, one of the best defensive backs in the country in this recruiting class. It is a South Carolina and Texas battle, and he commits this Friday. Alex, I can tell you on my end, it flips almost every single day. I do think that Texas has a more enticing NIL package, but I don't think the Gamecocks are that far off money-wise. And look, y'all, you've heard me mention NIL this 3rd time on this show. When you're talking about summer recruiting and summer commitments, it's important. So, Alex, Samari Matthews, what's your feel there?
Yeah, it's really close, I think. I think it's been close for a long time. Like, Texas has some momentum. South Carolina had that last official visit, which was key. And, he moved that commitment date up just because I think he was probably ready to have this recruiting process over. And because I think it was August 10th was his original commit date. And I think it's really still close. I think it could be one that goes into a few more days into his Friday commitment. And not sure if I'm ready to call it one way or the other. I know there's still a lot of Texas momentum, but I think South Carolina's doing everything they can, to see what they can do. And I think he's going to be one, whichever way it goes, continue to watch the recruitment, just because I think both schools won't stop either way, depending on which way it goes. And kind of, I think we've said that for a lot of guys here, but I think that's, and kind of to that point real quick, like you look back to last year, like, I think you saw Malik Clark in the summer, in the late July, commit to Florida State, and South Carolina stayed in that one, ultimately landed. We had Demola Adjadahun, the 4-star offensive lineman from Georgia Tech commit, stay. Like it kind of just goes to show that it's a marathon in the recruitment. And I think that's something that we'll talk about here for a while. Like it's still going to keep going on for South Carolina. Like it's going to continue to recruit all these guys, but back to Samari Matthews, like I think it's still just really close, and interested to see how these next couple of days kind of turn out leading up to his commitment on Friday.
Yeah, and don't forget Mazio Bennett when it comes to kids that committed somewhere else and end up at South Carolina. Jasavion Currents is safety. He's a 4-star committed to South Carolina. Tamarian Watkins, he's committing on the 14th. It looks like South Carolina and Texas A&M. This one's super interesting because you have the stronger, longer theory with South Carolina. You have, local, close to home, family can watch them play, but you also have some Texas A&M shenanigans happening.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of Texas A&M momentum in this recruitment, and really, it's kind of come on. I think since Texas A&M's official visit with Watkins, like I think it's kind of been building, and it seems to obviously be a South Carolina Texas A&M battle for him. And another one that you got, I think his is on Monday next week, but right now it seems like there's a lot of Texas A&M momentum there.
Yeah, and Joel Combe, 3-star, he's announcing tomorrow. I don't think it's going to be the Gamecocks. Probably watch Tennessee, but he's a guy the Gamecocks would have wanted. To echo what Alex said earlier, I'm just looking through my notes here. Tamarian Watkins, Samari Matthews, and Julian Walker. I'm just going to go ahead and say it right now. I don't know what is going to happen over the next 2 weeks with the 2 guys that are announcing, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. But I do think that between Walker, Matthews, and Watkins, they end up on signing day signing 2 out of the 3 at minimum. So just recruiting's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And just remember that. Looking here, Alex, right now, like I said earlier, the Gamecocks have the 11th ranked class in the country as of yesterday, based on average player rating. Gamecocks have 18 players that are going to exhaust their eligibility after this season. So you're looking at 18 minus 10. So 8 more players if there's no more attrition from the roster. We know there's going to be attrition on the roster. There are going to be players that transfer for whatever opportunity. And then, you look at the guys that have an opportunity to leave earlier. Lenore Sellers, we all have seen him mocked in the first round. Wide receiver Nick Harbor, you just can't fake that speed. It's a real thing. So you'll have to see what happens with him. We all remember Troy Williamson going top 10 overall, and Nick Harbor is a 6'5" Troy Williamson. Then a defensive tackle, Alex, I'm interested in your take on this. Like, this isn't me predicting anybody's going to leave, but Brownlow Dindy has the 5-star history. Troy Pikes and Devontae Miles, they're transfer kids. They have the opportunity to maybe make a splash and try and go pro. Defensive back, Judge Collier, we've already seen him predicted to be drafted in the first round. Brandon Cisse, if he has a monster year, I could see him going. Vicari Swan and Jalen Kilgore. So that's 9 guys that could potentially leave early. I don't think I missed anybody.
Yeah, just off the top of my head, you reading those names, I'm not sure you did, but that's one that it's so hard to tell this time of year because you never know. Like, does Lenore Sellers take his game to the next level, as he absolutely could, and become a first-round pick, top 10 pick? Like, just something that, I think that's kind of interesting to see, like, from a recruiting class standpoint with this 2026 class, like how that fills out from a numbers standpoint, because obviously they're going to continue to add. They'll add more and more to that class, but just from a numbers standpoint, how things are all kind of turn out.
Yeah, and I do want to make a note here. Quantrell asked in the chat box, do they plan on pivoting if they don't land guys, or just take a smaller class and focus on portal? I think that every single college football program in the country right now is going to really be sure about the high school players that they take and make sure that they're not reaching on too many guys. Not saying that South Carolina is in position to reach on too many guys, but I think that the portal is the way of the future in a lot of sports, not just football, college basketball, college baseball, softball. I wouldn't be too concerned about recruiting rankings going forward from the high school level. I would look at how they fill gaps, how they fill players, and there. So yeah, Quantrell, they're going to take all the good players they can get at high school. This program still wants to be a developmental program, or this college still wants to be a developmental program. Trent Dowd in the comments says Sellers for Heisman, easy money, top 5 pick. Yeah, I hope so. That'd be really fantastic.
Yeah. Lenore Sellers is a top 5 pick and winning the Heisman. I'd say it's pretty safe bet that South Carolina had a pretty good year this year.
Yeah, I think that you're pretty much in the playoffs. I mean, heck, the basketball team just had a top 10 pick in the draft, so you never know. But Alex, man, it was so good to be back with you this week. We'll be back next week on Wednesday. Inside the Gamecocks, the show comes back on Monday, and SEC Media Days are going to be in full swing. If you want any more details on the kids that are going to be committing soon, JC had a great coffee episode this morning if you haven't watched it. And if you're looking for ITG Chief Sports Network content, JC's been doing a great job with coffee. So check that out. And you got Tailgate Talks. I really, really love the Demetrius Knight interview that Pat and Steven had. And if you haven't listened to it, the Jackie Bradley Jr. one's about an hour and a half, and that one was fantastic as well. But Alex, any parting shots before we get out of here?
No, it's good to be back. It's kind of crazy that, like I said at the beginning of this, already July 8th. Football season be here before you know it. Great time of the year, and before you know it, preseason camp's here, and then really once you get to preseason camp, it's on from there. Like it comes quick from that point. But looking forward to these next few weeks here, kind of leading up to it.
Oh, absolutely. So 53 days until Gamecock football season starts. 7 more weeks after tonight. Alex and I will be here to bring you all the coverage. We're so excited to do it. And yeah, hey Brandon, I see you in here right here. Maybe you just popped in. Combi still committing tomorrow, and we do not expect it to be South Carolina. So when you join us, all of you, you give us the most valuable thing you have, your time, and we appreciate it. We don't take it for granted. And if you have any questions, this chat box is always open. You can reach us on thebigspur.com. You can reach us on our Twitters, but or I guess I should say X's. But X's sounds weird. I don't want my X's calling me. But we appreciate y'all so much, and we hope you have a great rest of the week, and we see you next week. Bye, guys.